Hey there, and welcome to my Wildermyth build guide series. These are going to be 20 to 30 minute crash course guides targeted at players looking to optimize for walking lunge, which is the hardest difficulty in the game, with carved in stone enabled. So if you're unsure what that looks like, that would be if we go to any of these legacy campaigns, or any of the campaigns at all, you set the difficulty to walking lunge, and you check carved in stone here. That's what we're optimizing for here. Now, up front, I will say that I don't think you need to be 100% optimal in order to actually successfully defeat the walking lunge difficulty with carved in stone. I think you can play at roughly 85% optimization and still do just fine. That gives a lot of flexibility in how you approach these builds, and because assembling them can sometimes be difficult, especially with transformations and events required and optimal history elements, I think that's fine. I won't be covering too much of the quote-unquote every hero should have some optimal starting stuff background. I'll explain notionally what they are in a later video, but basically there are histories, there are hook quests, and there are other things that are essentially always must-takes. If you can get them on a hero, they're always good to have. You should always take them. Things like giving your heart away to Lord Evergreen or something like that. Those are good examples of it. They're not important for this. Just assume that every hero has it if it's perfect. And yeah, so I promised these following my Walking Lunge Carved in Stone blind campaign playthroughs, and so I wanted to deliver on that. These builds are functional at both the recommended number of starting calamities. So when you start in a legacy campaign, it's going to recommend a number for you. They're also viable at 100 calamity starts. I have played those campaigns. They're much more difficult, but these are the builds you want to be taking in there. Additionally, I want to put these into video form for those that benefit from it. You get some visual aids here. You get to see some of my heroes that are taking advantage of these builds, and that helps compared to some, written guides that maybe don't spin this the way you need to. I am going to cover the abilities, gear, transformations, and some variations that I consider high value. Note in advance, like I said, you can flex still plenty and win no matter what. And as a reminder, leave a comment with your ideas for other guides you'd like me to make. You can like the video and subscribe if you want to see more. I'm going to be covering a bunch of builds I personally use, and we'll be going through a good number of them. I may not have builds assembled for all the videos I want to make. I might work a little bit on assembling a hero first, because, well, that's pretty difficult, unsurprisingly. So I will be covering the ones that I have assembled right now, and also because they are tested by myself. I have played them successfully, and you've seen them on the channel, so fair enough. For this first video, we're going to be talking about my favorite build in the game. It's why I wanted to do it first, the Backstab Hunter. So let me pop open one of my examples of it. This may be called other things. It gets called Melee Rogue. I call it a Hunter, obviously, because it is a Hunter build. Rogue is just kind of one of the skill names, and what it gets called in other video games as well. It is a melee, more or less perfectly melee Hunter build. You're primarily living in melee combat. You are not ranging very often, though as you can see, sometimes you do. It is a high priority target elimination build in the best possible form. Basically, you see a really large enemy that you need to remove immediately because it represents a huge threat. This build can kill it outright in potentially one turn if you set it up correctly. And it requires support from other units that enable flanking. For these videos, I am assuming you understand basic mechanics of the game. I'm not going to explain what flanking is, for instance, but if you can flank, this build capitalizes on it, so it requires support. I particularly like offensive broadsides warriors and area of effect mystics for this because they can set up flanks from multiple angles, which is very advantageous. It can also enable its own flanks, which is good, but at the cost of basically giving up its gray plane, or which I will henceforth call stealth because gray plane is a confusing term for anyone just blindly looking at this video. I also want to mention a big shout out to partnering this with a Compulsion Plus Mystic. It's brutally effective. You can just walk an enemy in range and just kill it outright. So fair enough. That's pretty excellent. You can obviously pair it with Hammer, Hammer, Maul, or Child of the Hills, or I suppose also Elm Soul Warriors. First, similar enemy movement reasons you knock an enemy in range, and then you get a lovely little backstab on it. Very good. There are some core skills here that I want to hit on. Let's hop over. The most important ones are Rogue and Thornfang. Now, I obviously on my Mythwalker here have both of these in their upgraded forms because I think, well, one, I don't think Rogue Plus is that important. The base ability of this is when you kill an enemy, you enter stealth for free. Really important. This is the important element, a critical component to enable this build in the first place. Basically, you kill an enemy, you go back into stealth, you can keep killing enemies. The upgraded version it's fine, I suppose. It's bonus damage. Sometimes you'll just get it over the course of a run by accident. Thornfang, I think Thornfang Plus is significantly more important because it lets you get a lot of extra turns and a lot of extra kills, but I think this build is functional with just base Thornfang as well as you're ranking it up in your legacy. So those are the two core abilities here. I consider them mandatory for this, and I think that because you need both of these, the build is very hard to assemble when you're just starting out a character as a level 1 hero. This happens in the campaigns where you bring in some legacy heroes and you sometimes have some new ones as well. Maybe they are hunters. It can be difficult to assemble this build. I usually don't recommend it for those level 1 starting characters in Walking Lunch campaigns. However, if you have the ability to build these up over multiple campaigns and successfully kind of put them in your legacy, then you should be able to assemble this thing and reap the rewards when you play on Walking Lunch later on with your Mythwalkers. So that's generally how I would approach it. I'll hit on some supporting skills here. I think I have the most important ones here. Long Reach and Long Reach Plus are extremely important for this. They let you have a much cleaner time of getting more than one kill. So ideally you want to kill one enemy, and then you want to have flanks set up on a lot of adjacent enemies, and then you want to kill all of them at once, basically. And Long Reach enables you to do that. It also helps a lot with daggers, which I think are 100% the optimal weapon choice for this build. I'll hit more on that later, but they benefit a lot from Long Reach. Long Reach Plus, similarly, it's a nice little perk. It's good. I think you can also make a similar argument for the benefit of heroism. Basically, you pick a turn, and on that turn you murder everything, more or less. You can get something like you can get extra movement and just kill a guaranteed number of enemies. This is also good if, for whatever reason, you haven't been able to upgrade or whatever, and you need to attack an enemy multiple times. This can be great on capstone combats on chapters, because the bosses will probably not die in one hit. Things like Morthagi Matrons or whatever. And on those turns, you can just pop Heroism and hit them repeatedly with multiple flanks. And especially with something like Heroism Plus, if you go all in on that, you can just one-shot a boss and clean a run-up. This is really good when combat ends when the boss dies, because you can actually just run in and ninja a boss. Very strong overall. I also want to give a shout-out to Windwalk, which I do not have on tap here to show you, but Windwalk essentially lets you teleport once or twice if you upgrade it per combat to a location and kill things. This is really good because sometimes the enemies will body block you, especially in the case of tight, narrow passageways, Morthagi that clump up, things like that, and you want to be able to get behind them. This is what makes Windwalk really strong as an option here. I think Windwalk is a little better when you're maybe tweaking it away from daggers, so you have range in the form of something like a spear or whatever, but I think that is a little weaker. It's one of the reasons why this particular build and this particular character of mine does not have it. I do think it's a strong contender for this slot, though, and is something you should seriously consider, because you can kind of just get to where you need to go immediately and then start killing enemies. It can be very good for those pivotal turns. It also pairs well with Heroism, right? You teleport behind them and then you get a big turn where you can do whatever you want for a while. Pretty strong. There are some other abilities that sometimes show up when you go into a campaign, because remember, when you hop in, you start at level 5, but you carry with you 5 abilities here. I will almost always, in this particular build, take Thornfang Plus, Rogue unupgraded, and then Long Reach unupgraded, and Heroism. And then, essentially, as I'm leveling up, I upgrade any of them that they show me, or I take one of the other abilities if it becomes relevant. And those other abilities that I think are sometimes relevant, one of them is Bard, because giving your whole party +5 stunt chance, critical hit chance, is really good. You value the stunts a lot on this build. It's very powerful, and since it's party-wide, it's exceptional. I normally will never upgrade it, because it's usually overkill, but sometimes it's okay, so maybe it's fine. The upgrade gives you the 1-turn activation of a really big stunt chance benefit. It's like 50%, so. The other skill that is sometimes fine if you see it is Viciousness, the generic ability that's not even Hunter specific. That one, it just adds damage to your attacks. I mean, it's basically the same as Rogue Plus, right? You just get +1. So it's technically better because Rogue Plus doesn't work against a full health enemy, but since you're causing flanks anyway, it's usually pretty likely you've dealt at least 1 damage to an enemy to benefit from it, so it's basically the same, right? I usually avoid it, but because you have a dagger and you get the attack damage doubled, any plus damages are doubled, right? So you have a lot of value there. Those are the abilities as far as I think they matter. Obviously, prioritize the ones that I set up first. As far as gear, let's hop over that tab. I think there are a few variations of this. The first is you have Water Dagger, which is, in my opinion, just the absolute best weapon here. Not even a relic, just a Water Dagger. Really good. You want this because you want the water stunt effect. You really want that. And the dagger has a lot of benefits because of this ability right here. If flanking, you do 2 times damage after armor to an enemy with a dagger. And this is also extra good because with Grapeplane or Stealth, you ignore armor, which means that all of your damage is doubled. Very powerful. At the highest difficulties, Walking Lunch with Carved in Stone, I strongly encourage dagger. I think it is significantly better than other variants because enemies are huge. They get a lot of armor, they get a lot of everything, they have a ton of HP. You need to be hitting numbers in Chapter 2 of like 20 plus damage with this build, right? Especially depending on some of the campaigns where you can get weird overworld activities that force you to delay. You can't, for instance, if you have to build a lot of bridges or mountain passes or something, you can get stuck in scenarios where you're wasting a lot of time because it's part of the requirements of the run. And in those, you can get real bogged down by the calamities, which you need to watch out for. That's one of the reasons I think dagger is so good. As for your offhand, you have a number of options. I think there are 3 strong contenders here. The first is one I have equipped, Herlax. Basically, what you'll find is you will have multiple free turns, right, with flank setup, and you'll kill everything in melee. And then usually there's one enemy just a little bit out of range. It can be very helpful to have ranged attacks on the swap or on your offhand in order to kill them as well, because you still get flanking bonuses and you can do a lot of damage because those ranged attacks also benefit from stealth, ignoring armor. So you can do a lot of damage to just off extra enemies. It's one of the reasons I also think that having a full bow on the swap is really valuable. Just being able to swap to this and get value is really good. And it also helps out in certain combats where maybe you can't risk sending your stealthed melee rogue behind enemy lines because it will get detected and then killed, right? And so in those combats, you maybe have to have a ranged option, and I think that having a bow is very consistent and helpful. I like the Herlax because it shreds armor and it has a lot of value. You get to use it a few times, and it is a swift action, which I think is very valuable for action economy purposes here. It's one of the reasons I strongly value this. The throwing knives are also really good for the same reason. They get the backstab damage, similar to a dagger. You get more of them, but you basically are relying on the flank there, in my opinion. And sometimes you're not going to have the flank set up on your ranged targets that you're just throwing extra stuff at. these are going to be your Draven darts, your Morthagi patrolmen, those kinds of enemies that are ranged and are hidden off in the side of the combat. Your raccoons from Gorgons and such. They're real problematic enemies that you need to address, and sometimes just throwing an axe at them from stealth will kill them and be worth it. So I usually love having the axe. The other thing that's really good here, though, the Dragon Paw Shield. I don't have it on this particular build right now. I think that is a strong contender for best in slot, though, because bonus damage is just really good, unsurprisingly. So yeah, and that just gives you bonus damage, and is really great when you get revealed because it's a shield, it can block for you, and it reduces damage that you take, which I think is great. You will get revealed periodically. It will happen, just based on the nuances of the combat, and you need to be prepared to make sure this character does not die instantly when that happens, because they can get overrun. I want to give a brief mention to the Bone Bow. I don't think it's very good on this build. I think the Water Bow is better, because if you are forced to play range, you would like your stunt chance to result in you getting an extra attack, right? I think that's very good. Whereas the Bone Bow, you're not really using potency very much in this particular variant of the build. And so you don't really care as much. And the Charisma, it's not bad to lose Charisma, but it is annoying when you're trying to maximize and min-max and get all your hook quests done and things like that. So, fair enough. The alternative, and I can show this off, is the Old Wayne Dagger. So, this is the same build on Unremembered over here, but it has... Where are you? It's going to show up right here. Yeah, the Old Wayne Dagger. This is another variant of the build. I'll talk about this more in a little bit because there is a lot to say here, but I think this is a viable weapon take here for sure. So, yeah, just don't sleep on that, in my opinion, because it is strong. It's worth noting this variant will use potency. It's one of the main reasons I think it's really strong, is because it gets potency. You see that actually over here. It gets potency scaling with its ability. And you can do Skeleton Dagger Plus to scale it even harder. So I think that this is really strong overall. Very worth it, because you can gear up with a lot of potency gear and truly get some astronomical backstab numbers, even though you're limited in some other senses. So let's hop back over to Jade. I want to continue talking from her perspective. Okay. So now I want to hit on transformations. You've already seen two of these, but I'm going to talk about the staples first. I think they're kind of just obvious choices. I think if you can, this build wants a Foxtail for sure. Foxtail is going to be on almost every build because I think it's just good and worthwhile. I also think that in general, having wings is good. Notice how I don't have them. Whatever. It's not mandatory, but like they're really strong when you have them. We go back over to Unremembered. You see I'm Crow-touched wings. You just get dodge, you just get speed. Movement is important to position yourself, and pretty much any of the wings are good. The main reason that this character doesn't have wings, by the way, is because I'm trying to do what I wanted to tell you next, which is if you're feeling really spicy, technically I argue that mothly wings are the strongest here for the emergency swift action stealth. It is possible to get those on a hunter, but it requires some trickery in the Aluna and the Moth campaign. No spoilers, in case you haven't played it yet, but it requires some other important characters dying intentionally in order to get the wings on your hunter. It is possible, and I think it's really strong. And that's why this character doesn't have wings, because I want to try to get those. I think they're just great. So, otherwise though, any wings are good. The Hawk wings, the Crow wings, all excellent. Draven wings are also great. They're all good. They're so close, it doesn't really matter that much which one you take. So fair enough. I do want to jump over back to Unremembered because I want to talk about the Skeletal transformation. You give up a lot here. You give up your bow, you give up your offhand, and you give up, relationships on the character, which is a downfall, right? Because you can't get bonuses to things like flank, to your crits, flank chance, right? You can't have a rivalry very effectively. You can't get Lover's Revenge. There's a lot of punishments for this build, but there's a payout and I want to talk about it. Basically, like I said, it's the potency interaction here, and it is very powerful for this particular build. I was just on it. Yeah, here we go. The spell damage bonus is hard to take advantage of. The only hunter ability that benefits from this is Flash Cone, which is fine. I usually take it if they show it to me, but I don't keep it in my legacy right now because it's kind of weird, right? It's good, but it's also, you can't use it enough times. It's kind of strange. It does benefit from this though, so that's kind of worth noting. Regardless, the purpose of this is the potency scaling on your dagger backstab, because your dagger backstab will ignore all armor, and because you're in stealth, and it will double damage because you're flanking. So this is awesome. You put enough potency gear on. I think I have some on this particular setup, right? Let's see if I have any. Alright, this one doesn't actually have anything good, but fine. So yeah, when I put this into Legacy, it doesn't have it. But regardless, you're looking for potency gear here, and you want to slam that into this character so that this number goes way through the roof. Yeah, I've only got a little bit on it here because the base value of the level character. But yeah, anyway, that's what you want to do. And then you can use this strike to do astronomical levels of damage. I think this puts out way more damage than the water dagger variant. Now, the important thing is that water dagger variant lets you hit multiple times because you can get the water stunt. It also has flexibility. You get ranged attacks, you get other transformation benefits, you get relationships. There are trade-offs. I think this build with the skeleton is raw power. This is if you want to actually one-shot a boss with your hunter. And that's truly it. There's also the obvious advantage of this character will literally never retire, because that's the notion, that's one of the advantages of skeletons. So you don't have to even think about that, which is kind of cool. There are some other advantages too. Technically, Bitter Scratch enables its own flanking. You can Bitter Scratch, move, and then backstab. This obviously does give up your stealth to do so, but sometimes you're not in stealth yet, right? And if you're not in stealth yet, then whatever. It's fine. And then Inscrutable Stare from the headpiece here is really good. If you're stuck in melee combat, you get revealed or something, you can just Inscrutable Stare some enemy into oblivion, they'll run away, and then you won't have to deal with them for 2 turns. You theoretically, since you can do this every turn, can just lock an enemy down. There are, of course, times where I consider them... I just lock enemies down. I don't even use the rogue abilities here, right? I just kind of keep Inscrutable Staring the enemy until they die to other attacks from my party. So, fair enough. I generally give this a pass because of the strength compared to the other one. That's why I have this build as well. There is an important shout out. I don't have this build configured, but there is a variant. I'm going to show you Palette Free here because she at least has it. There is a variant of this that uses Wolftouched. And I think this is good, but you quickly realize that the Wolftouched abilities are not as excellent. This is important, okay, because I think in general you can run this build. It's a great transformation choice here. The melee claw attacks are water stunts. They're quite powerful. You can theoretically get extra kills with the bite from the head here. You can see it on the right. It's a free action. You theoretically just kill a man with that, which is pretty good. It also scales with potency if you opt to go with the wolf arms, and the legs give bonus speed, which is great. It's a really high speed modifier, 0.5 for your leg, which is one of the best. I think it actually is the best. I'm pretty sure that the other options are less, so yeah, 0.2 or whatever. So fair enough. There are trade-offs, but wolf has the best leg for sure for this build. Now, I typically rank this weaker than Skeletal, though, simply because you don't get the benefits of wielding a dagger when you use the wolf skills. Technically, you could, like this character, right, keep a dagger, right? But the thing is that I regularly find myself, as I was optimizing this variant of the build, I just wanted less and less wolf and more other stuff. Right, I think there are other transformations that provide better benefits overall. That said, this variant will still win Walking Lunch Carved in Stone at 100 Calamities, so is it really bad? No, it's not bad. I mention it because it's excellent. You can run it if you want. I don't have it constructed though, so definitely keep that in mind. It's real powerful. Those water stunts on those melee hits, pretty good. It's pretty satisfying having variants, right, so you can have some options so your runs don't always look the same. Now, I want to go back real quick to Jade. There you are. I want to talk about Celestial. This is a ridiculously good transformation for this build, for a lot of reasons. First, you generally want to avoid transformations on the arms here because you want the bow, you want the dagger, you want the offhand. Honestly. I don't recommend any arm transforms here at all, pretty much. Now, that said, this one is really good for a few reasons. One, you get bonus speed on the legs. Cool. It's not as much as some of the others, but you get it. Two, you get blinding attacks. This is really good if, for some reason, like you throw a ranged attack at a unit and it doesn't kill it. Maybe you're in good positioning, you don't mind giving up your stealth for it. And then with a quarter chance, so 25%, you just blind the enemy and their next turn is wasted. This is actually really strong. You never rely on it, but when it happens, it can save a ton of incoming damage. And you just completely mitigate an enemy for that point. I also want to talk about Celestial Path, the starry tiles that get spawned when you walk with this character. Really good, because it creates additional tiles that your team benefits from with greater accuracy, plus 10, but you can also leave them and then benefit from them yourself. These are actually really good because I think accuracy is potentially the hardest part of this. Obviously, if you're flanking, you get the 100% hit, but in practice, you can't assume you're going to flank every hit. You just won't make it, right? And so notionally, you have those turns where it's like, okay, you have to hit this 86% in order to win. And those extra bits of melee the melee accuracy benefits, those are huge value, and those will save your runs by making those margins smaller so you're less likely to just lose on a 10% or something. I really like this. There is another variant that I don't have constructed, but that is Stormtouched. I think it fills similar roles to the Celestial here, right? So it does kind of the same things, right? The legs have an AoE stun on a swift action, which is really good because that AoE stun allows you to, kind of similar to Bitter Scratch on, wrong person, Bitter Scratch on the left arm of Skeleton, lets you set up your own flanks because you can Stormtouch, you can do the little stomp and then move and then backstab. Really good. Now, obviously, you can still do that here with the offhand by throwing an axe or a dagger and then moving around and doing it. So you still have that option on the build otherwise. But the big AoE on Storm Feet is really good for setting up for other characters. I think generally I would say Celestial is superior in a vacuum, but there are build compositions where the AoE stun is just way better in general, especially if you have things like Bard as your supporting skill, right? So you're applying extra stun chance, so your stun chance is actually really good off of that AoE stun, and it sets up other people for their own backstabs, right? If you're running two of these, having the second one be a Storm Soul is really strong for that reason. So, fair enough, don't sleep on that. I definitely also want to talk about pets a little bit. I think you see him here, right? Critter is really good. Plus 15 melee accuracy. I just talked about why this is so strong. It can help a lot. And I think Critter is an exceptional choice. Critter is also nice because for event farming purposes, this is not really optimal, right? Because if you walk in a walking lunch, you're probably already having your foxtails on everyone, but maybe you don't. Critter will find you the coin that gives you foxtails. Neat. Obviously, you can also get it from the crow wings too, so that's fine. Both of mine can currently get it, which is helpful. That's not really a very good thing to mention in optimization purposes, but it's a nice little perk of this buddy. The only other serious consideration here is Avenger, which is good for obvious reasons. Bonus damage strong. I think it's good, especially because bonus damage gets doubled when you're using the dagger, right? So it's +2, which is great. It is possible to get Avenger on a Hunter. You have to have your warrior who activated the event die in the combat when Avenger procs, and then you want someone else who has the correct matchmaking of personality to be the highest there so that they get it instead. So it is possible to get Avenger on a non-warrior, even though that's pretty weird because the warrior has to spawn the event. Kind of awkward, but certainly possible. And then you should almost always just assume grab a Droven bird too, right? For the same reason. I don't have it on that character, I have it on this one. Draw and Invert, you can get it on every character. I think this is also what I would consider part of the obvious choice. If you're really min-maxing, you should just put a Draw and Bird on everyone because it overlaps with other pets, which is, you know, really strong. So, fair enough. That said, it's, yeah, it's good. Just get him. It stacks, so why not? And yeah, I think that's really everything I have to tell you here. I don't have much else to say. I think this is one of the most powerful builds around. I think it can cascade clear an entire group of heavy enemies with proper positioning. I have run with this build, with these characters in multiple campaigns on the channel so far, so you can see combat examples of them in action and where they're powerful. I ran this character in particular with my Illuna and the Moth campaign, and she was pivotal in my success. Absolutely critical to my game plan, because I was blind going in, I didn't know what was happening. So I consider it fairly advanced though, because it does require expert level tactical gameplay. You need to position yourself extremely well. You need to be able to position enemies really well, so funneling them through choke points and things matters. You want to move them with hammers or with Child of the Hills abilities or Elm Soul or whatever. Compulsion. It can be tricky to play, but once you're good at it, it's extremely strong. And it excels against any species, right? Those with heavy armor get punished the most, so like Morthagi, right? But at the same time, it's just strong against any of them. I think it's one of the best, just general purpose, all-around builds in the game, period. So, yeah, that's honestly all I have to tell you here. Hopefully this is useful. I will wait to hear back comments, if this is good, useful, whatever, before recording the next one, and we'll kind of go from there. So, hey, you know, thanks a lot for watching this. I really appreciate your time. As always, you can give the video a like or a dislike if you want. You can subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and stay tuned for what's next. Take care, folks.